Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those on the West Coast. I'm Tom Skura, Vice President of Content and Programs for the Cybersecurity Collaborative. I'd like to welcome members of the collaborative and guests to our discussion today, a CISO's Guide to Harnessing the Power and Managing the Risks of Artificial Intelligence. The materials in this deck have been put together by a working group in the Cybersecurity Collaborative of a cross-section of different companies and different industries. What we have to show you today really focuses on the CISO and the CISO's role in managing the AI demand and also the implementation of various AI models. Just a few things to keep in mind. This presentation, as they all are, is packed with a lot of information, probably more than anyone can consume. But I will say this is available to all members of the collaborative, and it's also available to those who are our guests here. There'll be a place at the end that you'll see an email, and you can request this information. This entitles you to 1 CPE. Any questions you have, please put in the Q&A box, and there'll be a poll at the end just to get information about whether or not you got some good insights from this and your interest in the collaborative. So with that, I'd like to move on and introduce our panelists today. First, our executive sponsor, Kevin Morrison, who's a CISO of Driven Brands. Kevin, thank you very much for your leadership on this team. Tell us a little bit about Driven Brands and your role as a CISO.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Good to be here. So yeah, Kevin Morrison, VP and CISO with Driven Brands. So for those of you who may not be familiar with it, it's the leading aftermarket company in the auto services industry. So including through brands such as Meineke, Maaco, Take 5 Oil, Take 5 Car Wash, a number of different glass companies that have been consolidated into what's called Driven Glass, one of North America's largest parts distributors, and amongst others. So anything in that particular space is where we play. And it's good to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'll now introduce Greg Birkin, is the CIO of Lazada Therapeutics. Greg, welcome.
Thanks again for having me back on board here. It's been a pleasure working with the task force. So as you said, I'm CIO as well as acting CISO and DPO for a clinical stage oncology-based pharmaceutical company. And looking forward to the next hour conversation talking about next-gen AI.
Thank you, Greg, for being here. And Cheryl Nifong, CISO of the University of Texas at Arlington. Cheryl, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Tom, for inviting me back. I'm CISO at the University of Texas at Arlington. We're a Tier 1 research university. It is Arlington, Texas, just so you know. And we have about 40 to 50,000 students. We're one of the largest public universities in North Texas, and I'm over the information security program.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. And also thank you for your participation in Greg's at ISW, which occurred at the end of September. It was a great panel discussion, and we look forward to continuing this here. So for those who are not familiar with the Cybersecurity Collaborative, I will take a moment to share with you its value, both to the CISOs that are attending here and also to your staffs. For a CISO, one of the things you don't ever want to do is be blindsided in the morning when some management comes in and said, I heard about a breach at this organization, and is it going to affect us? What are we going to do about it? The morning security report comes out at 6:30 a.m. Eastern time, and it's in your email. You can open it up and skim recent advanced developments, vulnerabilities. It's also used very much for informing the security awareness program as well, and threat intelligence. So that's one thing you get as a CISO. But the other things you get really is, connections with other CISOs in the industry, an ability to ask the expert rapid response. If you have a immediate question or need, you can reach out, and we'll connect you with other CISOs to help work on problems or issues that you're having. But also to your staff, it's very important to recognize your staff is continually being trained needs to learn about various best practices in the security disciplines. We offer task forces like the one we had with artificial intelligence on different security topics. We have them on security metrics. We have them on vulnerability management. It allows you to engage with your peers in other industries to identify best practices and work on your challenges. We're all under NDA. From those task forces, we develop best practices. Members share tools, policies, templates. All these are created by your peers in industries. They're not provided by any vendors who are not attending any of these sessions. There's also a huge content library that we've been developing over the years of materials, guidance documents, and tools in all security disciplines. Two other things: the Cybersecurity Leadership Program is a 12-week program where members can attend and understand their role in improving the management aspects of cybersecurity, how to improve their leadership capabilities. And at the end of that, there were some incident response tests that go on where you collaborate with your peers in a simulation and determine how best to address those incidents. I might say also that staff are always needing to get CPEs for their certifications. Being on these task forces, they're an hour long. They run 8 weeks, 10 weeks typically. There's 6 or 7 task forces that run, and some are continuing, like security metrics and AI is continuing. All of which you are entitled to CPE credits, and we provide you with certificates on that. What's unique about this is it's vendor-free, and it's an ability for you to collaborate with your peers across multiple industries. And out of these task forces, we do get best practices guidance. So what I'd like to talk today is the background on the task force, AI defined demand and risks. We could talk about ad infinitum. So we're gonna briefly touch about what AI is and what AI is not. The demands that are occurring will refer to a McKinsey study, and then some of the risks that we've identified in our team. We have categories of risks. The big takeaway here for all members is to embrace the CSC AI management quadrangle. There are 4 main areas that the CISO needs to focus on. We're going to talk about what those are. We're going to identify strategies in each of those, and then we're going to actually get into some of the tactical tools that might help you do that. And again, as I said, this presentation with all this information is available to everyone, so don't feel you have to embrace everything now. We'll summarize what we've discussed here, and then we'll have a quick panel discussion at the end and address your questions. We'll close with cybersecurity collaborative initiatives and key content, and we'll work on from there. Well, so what I'd like to do, and I'd like to bring my team members in here a little bit, is we have these weekly meetings. Here are the companies that have participated on the AI Security Task Force. Again, we're growing, we're adding more people. This is a task force that will continue on into next year. There are organizations representing different industries, as I mentioned before. We share our successes, false starts, and challenges, as well as materials, as I mentioned. We're all under NDA, and there's so much value to that. And this includes the use of tools and systems as well. So if someone's having an issue with implementing a particular tool, others will share their experiences with being successful in doing so. But maybe I'll just open this up to any of my panelists. So you've been on these meetings every week. We started in July, and of course, it starts out with an agenda, and we work on some things. What sort of value did you get from your peers on this? Anyone want to comment?
Yeah, Tom will jump in. So
thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, you bet. The ability to bounce ideas off of other folks is critical, both from our own perspective as we look to formulate our strategies and understanding of the different platforms and technologies that exist out there in the marketplace. But also, as you mentioned, there's a large variety of organizations that represent different industries, different size companies, whether they're public, private. So the different perspectives that you get from the leaders within those organizations really helped provide a lot of different perspective, and the collaboration's been top notch in this particular task force. I've been really happy and thrilled to be part of it, and I know that others have expressed the same thing. So it's been very valuable.
Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just kind of reiterate what Kevin was saying, is just the collaboration, just being able to bounce things off of other CISOs, and just the different type of companies and this different size companies, just being able to have those differing perspectives. It really helps you. To me, it helps me build that to make my strategy stronger, to have all these different perspectives and to be able to incorporate that into my strategy. And this topic has just been an excellent topic. I think we've taken all the different areas of the AI topic and have come out with really good information for those listening of how do you tackle AI. And I think we've come up with some really good strategies from this group.
Oh, thanks, Cheryl. I really appreciate all your inputs too, as well. And Greg.
I think the biggest takeaway for me for this task force has been, once I think I've got my mind made up on something, or I've learned enough about generative AI, I come to these meetings and, somebody's schooling me on something. So it's a great level of education. And I think a lot of us have been to enough census webinars before, or conversations with our peers, where we get nothing out of it. And this is a complete opposite in this scenario.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, every time we have these meetings, we learn something more, and we are able to come up with a framework to be able to begin to manage this. But now we're getting into the pluses and minuses of OpenAI, ChatGPT, and different technologies, and that's evolving as we speak, which is why we're going to continue on this. But thank you all for sharing that, and for sharing your concepts and ideas throughout here with other members has been extremely valuable. Well, speaking of that, Richard Rushing of Motorola has been a great contributor to many of our task forces. This is a wonderful presentation you put together. Artificial intelligence is no match for natural stupidity. For members, that is available. And then harnessing the power of AI at UTA with the CIO, Cheryl, your CIO at the University of Texas at Arlington, was a wonderful presentation that explained AI and the approach that the University of Texas is taking, really to look at this and embrace it within their community. So it's wonderful. So I'll just start with, we don't read all of this, but I went to AI, ChatGPT, and say, okay, help me out here. This is AI's version of defining itself. Here's a quick definition. I won't read it all. Okay, that's fine. And then came up with a series of different types of AI and using that. And then lastly, a series of different use cases. So it kind of frames it, defines it, different types and use cases, but you can certainly go into this in much more depth. This is all to say that this particular technology is really transformative in all aspects of business. So that's using AI and the power of AI to get this. But let's talk about it. Let's define it human to human, because one of the things as human is we all suffer from information overload. Many will say that after they've seen this presentation. There's a lot here. But human to human, one way to look at it, and this is what was presented by Cheryl's organization, is to say what AI is and what AI is not. Because all the information that we have is so much to consume. It engenders a lot of fear, questions, and so forth. This was a good example to someone who may not understand it at all, at least to put it in some kind of context and perspective, which means we as humans still need to be involved in the use of all of this. It's very important. And I think the third point here, it is not a replacement for humans at all. We need to manage and do this. So thank you, Cheryl, for the human to human definition of AI. As far as demand information, there's a lot out in the press on this. One study that was very interesting with McKinsey, a well-known firm, is that generative AI, they identified 63 use cases across 16 businesses. Cost and productivity benefits. Strategically, in your organization, there are three things that AI are going to do, or at least being considered by your executives, and their strategic considerations. One is lowering costs for a competitive advantage, improving productivity, and then product differentiation. Those are three things right now in a competitive marketplace that is attracting management to AI, okay, and probably driving the CISOs nuts. But keep that in mind. Those are key business demands. When IT first came in, they were the same types of things that eventually draw up management to investing more in IT, not initially. They're talking about benefits ranging from 2.6 to 4.4 trillion, 850 occupations impacted. Automating work activities take up 60 to 70% of employees' time today, and half of today's work activities could be automated between 2030 and 2060. If we all live that long, we'll see if this is truly the case. But this is currently the thinking of a major think tank right now, and non-generative AI is even more in terms of the 11 to 70.7 trillion. The point we're making behind this is many executives consider this a strategic opportunity, okay, and that's what is being imposed on the CISOs at the moment. Just another graph on this from Databricks Lakehouse to show even in the last year how much large language model tools and SaaS APIs are growing. So this is just taking off now. It's been around, but it's really now being embraced. And what we defined, so everyone says, okay, what are the key risks? And we came up with a list of them, but we've grouped them into confidentiality, integrity of the data outputs. What you're doing with AI now, I mean, it's, we used to, when you're writing code, you're writing code to make sure the inputs and outputs are well defined, that the outputs reflect the inputs and that the code's correct. Now it's all about the data you're putting in and training it. It's a little different paradigm. And like everything, we used to worry about confidential data and then availability. Now with ransomware, well, integrity is now really key here. Is the reliability and accuracy of the output, whether or not they're biased, non-compliance and copyright infringement concerns, and increased risks of liability on the firm for misuse. Misuse is, adversarial attacks and malicious use from nation states. We all need to be concerned with that. Shadow IT going off and using it and misusing it. Business use on unauthorized computing devices. So taking company data, doing it on my own personal device because I can't do it on my business device, and unvalidated outputs. And then the third area is the larger societal impacts, that things that we may not have direct control over, but we're concerned about, impact the skills, job displacement, concerns on the environment. So this was what we came up as a task force. I'm sure there are other things that can be added here. Now, this is the key part that I want everyone to please pay a little attention to. And this is, you're the CISO, or you're working for the CISO in this organization. And the AI management triangle is the way to look when we talk about harnessing, securely putting this in. This is a way to kind of embrace the AI revolution in a way that is going to manage it and implement it securely. The CISO must be fully engaged. You have an opportunity to provide greatly needed leadership in this. And there are 4 areas. And we'll get into all of these and some strategies. Is to understand the landscape. The landscape is, what is the demand? Who's using it? But what's going on out there with Microsoft and ChatGPT? Implement governance structures and processes. Just can't bring it in. There has to be some way to manage it, understand the risks, bring it in a secure way. The third thing will be communication to the board, management, and users. All these constituents will be involved in this, and the CISO needs to be involved, not just to the board, but also to management who want to bring this in. And then there are users, what's acceptable? What's an acceptable use of this? And lastly, providing opportunities for secure AI use. Many companies started off by saying no until they get a governance structure, but they're not going to be able to say no forever. Some of our team members now are bringing in Microsoft, Copilot in a beta form and trying to work out the parameters. But you're going to have to find ways to support this and manage it, just like you did, with other types of technologies. It's still going to happen here. So landscape, governance, communication, and use are the 4 areas you're going to have to continually provide time, input, and resources to as you transgress the use of AI, over time. Okay, that's from this team, and it's come out loud and clear. So I just have to open this up. It's an opportunity for CISOs, but it's also a concern. Greg, you always said, listen, I still have to put my hat on the CISO as one that's got to protect this company. I just can't just roll this stuff in, right? But you're in an organization that, might find some benefit on this at some point too. But so tell me how you're struggling as a CISO with
that. You mean
2
besides
seconds
every
more.
day? Yeah, besides every day, sure.
Yes, sure.
So it's like I said before, it's a great learning experience when we hop on these bi-monthly calls with the task force, because once I think I've got my mind made up on the direction we're going to go here, to use, to not use, who to use, and to what capacity, things that sort of stirred up from my perspective. But for a pharmaceutical company, like I mentioned during InfoSec World, right, we have the patients, the health at risk. We're a publicly traded, highly regulated type of organization. So I can't just have sort of the rubber meet the road when it comes to this. I need to do my due diligence, but there could be a myriad of use cases for us, certainly from a drug discovery standpoint, where generative AI could be extremely helpful. We're just not there at this point.
Right, exactly. So there is that demand, but you've got a management. Anyone else, Kevin or Cheryl? Any thoughts on the CISO's role here? And one to protect the organization, the others to enable things as well. So
I think just to talk about higher ed, if there's any other users on here from a higher ed organization, AI is being looked at from a higher ed standpoint is the, that upside risk, the opportunity that AI could give you competitive advantage, right? And from a technology perspective, we're looking at AI from a technology innovation standpoint, not just the security standpoint. And so you do have to understand the landscape. And so right now we have a work group at the executive level looking at what's the landscape, what is the use of AI already happening, and then how do we get our hands around the governing structure of that to make sure that we have the right policies in place. And then while we're working on policy, that maybe we put in some type of guideline immediately with like ChatGPT to let our institution know, hey, we know that this is happening. We know that there's Gen AI work going on. These are kind of your guardrails, and making sure that people understand what is confidential data and not putting confidential data in those tools.
exactly.
So that's what we're dealing with right now.
Good point. And in higher ed, there's so much of a opportunity to use this to train students on this. And of course, there's the downside of ChatGPT and writing reports and all of that as well. So that are concerning. So there's a lot here, and there's a lot to be learned from your organization, from businesses and governments as well. Kevin, any thoughts as well?
I'll just say that, our charge as CISOs within the organization, I guess with anybody in the organization, you either create, enhance, or protect value. And every person within an organization is, whether they know it or like it or not, is charged with protecting value. So these type of innovative platforms really give us an opportunity to partner with the business in a little bit of a deeper manner to create and enhance value. So there's a lot of innovative opportunities here where, yes, we absolutely need to put the governance structures in place. And even from an architectural perspective, as like you mentioned, organizations are looking to now pull in these generative AI capabilities into their private environments to where they can better manage and have that capability of not worrying about, did we just release confidential data that's now out there within a model?
Right.
So I think the governance structure for us has really been key to try to make sure that we've got our due diligence, or we're doing our due diligence and got the, T's crossed and the I's dotted. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
No, I think that's important. You have to do that without, and that's where some people were stopping this until the governance structure was put in place. It's very a key part of this. So for everyone listening to this, these are the 4 parts of the quadrangle. A lot of the presentation is going to talk about strategy for landscape, for communication, use, and governance, and then tactics, specific guidance within that. So I'm going to run through some of this quickly. From the landscape side, as Cheryl said, it's external offerings, internal use cases, risk compliance, legislation, guidance, and support. In terms of strategies, one thing, and Cheryl's doing that, put together an AI working group, which is a cross-functional group across your company, your university, to say what is the demand, in fact, some of these things may be used, and that's a good way to start as a CISO, saying, okay, what we really need to do is understand, who wants it and who's using it, and then how can we go from there. The second thing is start putting together an inventory of current use as part of that working group. You're saying, here, the marketing group is looking at this particular technology for doing this. It does a couple of things. It can help prioritize things when you develop a strategic plan, which is on this list as well. The other thing is AI developments and tools. You got to identify reliable information sources for trends. There isn't any one source right now. We're going to go over a few things that we came up with a team that we think are useful. And the last, as I think Cheryl's doing, is create a strategic plan. It can be very basic, but how are we going to actually begin to assess and implement AI things as you would do in IT? So as far as understanding the landscape, this is a good way to grasp what's going on. This is a continual process. The AI working group, as I mentioned, can be several companies. You might want to put together a charter for the group. This is typically what a charter would consist of. Again, this is in the slide materials. You can take it from here when we give it to you. The AI inventory, again, what we did with best practices, a way to kind of manage this into groups. One of our members says, divide this into 4 categories. Individual uses of generative ChatGPT, that kind of thing. Then the internal side, internal development, new models and existing models, where we're going to be training them and not. So that's, a very specific area. And then last is the AI assistants that are coming out, Copilot, Einstein for Salesforce. Number 1 and 4 are the ones that are going to probably be, front and center. But 2 and 3 are going to require investments in your organization, investments in staff. But this is kind of a good way to kind of group things and begin to, provide some governance structure. And these are some of the things that you could put together in an AI workbook, which we're putting together is our next task. From the development side and tools, here's some things that you can use. The Cyber Risk Alliance, we have an AI newsletter that comes out. We have the morning security report that's talking about it. If you're a member of the Cyber Risk Alliance and a member of the Cybersecurity Collaborative, this is available to you. One member talked about foundational model transparency index from Stanford U. How transparent are these models? They actually look at them and tell you which ones are more open and transparent than others. There's the MITRE Atlas, which is a takeoff of the attack framework. NIST AI risk framework was cited quite a bit. Microsoft Responsible AI Impact Assessment template. It isn't a risk assessment, but it does help. You could actually use that to begin to frame your inventory and risks for these things. Responsible AI standard. The Google provides a safe AI framework as well. And there are some tools, and I only mentioned that we're not endorsing it, but members said that Cyberhaven was a tool that allowed you to see the flow of data into AI use cases. So you got to be mindful that these things will be very useful. And then you could put together a strategic plan, which is a vision, use cases, how you're going to manage risks, costs, and implementation timeframes as well. So I'll move on to the governance side, and we'll talk about putting a governance committee together. This can be an existing committee, but again, it's to evaluate and look at use cases, approve them or not. It's different from the working group where you're gathering information. This is a group now that here's something we want to put together. We actually want to implement this. Where does this fit in our plan? What are the risks? And it can be part of your overall governance structure. An AI use request process. One of the things that members did immediately was to put in the intranet site, if members wanted to request an AI model use, here's a form, and that begins to categorize and catalog some of these things so that you can evaluate them. AI risk management, process and tools for accepting risks, and AI policies and procedures. We have a guiding policy and acceptable use policy are the four strategies and components of the governance side. And let me kind of run through these quickly. Again, this is the governance side and the use request process. These are some of the information that are being requested here for you. AI risk management, there's a risk profile that we're developing for each use case. And this is something we're going to be putting together in a workbook by the end of the year, early January. So some of the risk profile considerations that and again, we'll have a check form to do this, is what's the value to the enterprise? Is it strategic or is it tactical? What's the source? Is it internally developed or commercial model? What about the third-party provider? Viable? Is it no provider? Do they have a security program? Typical third-party due diligence. The scope, is it all users, a specific department? The sensitivity of the data, the model, internal and external PI, what are we actually putting into this and what we need to protect? Another key point, number 6, is reliance on the outputs. Is there bias, data reliability, integrity issue? Is this something that we're extremely going to rely on this all the time? Is it significant, moderate, low? It's informational. One has to decide how important that is because that's going to inform the care of feeding. The architecture is on-prem, multi-tenant, separate tenant. Of course, the host of security controls. Big part is access. Microsoft's doing more of that, data protections, logging, vulnerability management, and then model training characteristics. Is internally trained, trained once, continually trained, externally trained? Are there data feeds? Are they static or dynamic in the training model? Again, this can be part of an existing process, part of the application's acquisition process, for example. But by doing this profile, whenever you bring something in, it's going to determine how much care and feeding and oversight you're going to need for this. In other words, just not like running a program and it doesn't break and you forget it. No, you might have to be looking at outputs and inputs more carefully, doing more testing and making sure you're implementing more security controls. On the policies and procedures side, again, the two things are governing AI policy, which we have, and an AI acceptable use policy. We have two examples of that we offer our members. Third-party risk management process, you're going to have to start thinking about AI components on that. Like, how are you using our data? Is this required? Do you have to use it or not? Et cetera. So understanding how third parties are beginning to use the data in terms of AI to support you. And then in incident management too, if there are AI related incidents that aren't just breaches of the data, but maybe data integrity issues, they have to be brought into the incident management process as well. Move on to communication, make sure we have enough time for questions at the end. This is the third pillar here. And the CISO has to communicate to management, to the boardroom, and also to users. To management, personal outreach, there are organizations I know that have visas and they say, I'm not sure what visas are. We have them and they, we don't know what they're doing, but this is a good way with VISOs and personal envoys to do outreach on this to management, understand their needs and also to say what we're doing to meet those needs. For users, newsletters, lunch and learns, an internal website having something on AI on there, or talking about it staff and all hands meetings, just like you would do security awareness. You could use those vectors for communicating. And in the boardroom, we've actually we have a boardroom presentation template for all members, all the components typically you would talk to in a boardroom. We've added one other slide on this that is designed around our 4-tier quadrangle. And just talk a little bit about the board. What are you doing on the landscapes guide? What have you done on governance? How are you communicating this? Where are we using these things? This is something that the board is interested in, and something that probably CISOs now need to bring up to the board. I'm going to just ask the team here, if you had to, is your board asked you to talk about this? Are you planning at some point to talk about your AI strategies to the board?
You know, Tom, it's funny. This is actually how this whole task force kind of got started, just because the board asked me at the beginning of the year when ChatGPT was a hot topic and had just come off the in the public sphere. And so they were asking, what's our strategy on this? What's our position? And I said, honestly, we haven't had that discussion yet. It's something that we need to have. So told them we'd circle back and work with legal and other appropriate stakeholders within the organization to formulate what our perspective is and our approach and so forth. So when I put the question out through the anonymous survey through the collaborative membership, hey, what are other CISOs doing on this? Do you either A, allow it, B, prevent it, or C, allow it on a use case basis, on an exception case basis, if you will?
I think that's a good point. And that's what's being asked now of the CISO, right? Because they're probably going to say, you're going to allow it, you're going to stop it. If you say you're going to stop it altogether, then why, that's a tough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's not a recipe for success.
No, that's why we have that's why we're managing it like we manage everything, right? Well, we're not just opening the floodgates, we're managing it. So I know, Cheryl or Greg, any thoughts?
For our board, so we had kind of the same situation where the board had gone to our CIO and asked her to present on our strategy around AI. And so obviously I shared with you her presentation, and that was very recent and this fall. And now we have kicked in our working group, and we've actually done our first meeting. And now we are looking at, talking about our strategy, what's the landscape looking like. And we've already been talking about policies and coming out with immediate guidelines while we're working on policy. And so, yes, we're definitely having these conversations right now.
Greg,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing. End of Q1, during one of my presentations to the board on cybersecurity, was conversation of AI came up. Since my initial conversation, every day in the news, we continuously hear now about, Gen AI. So it's becoming another pillar that we need to focus on during these conversations. And that's not just cybersecurity risk exposure, or now it becomes, all right, to Kevin's point, how do we use AI to, continue to keep the business productive or increase productivity? Because we just can't stop it at every. It's just not possible. And even if you wanted to, no one's going to be a big fan of that. So at some point, you're going to have to give into it, and you're just going to have to ascertain, figure out how to keep your data, your finances, your IP safe. And again, I mean, that's the point of having these conversations here on a bi-monthly basis is, oh, I thought I've got that figured out, but clearly I don't. So let me just take a step back and have a breather here, and then discuss some possibilities with the board and the management team.
Yeah, that's why you have a framework and a way to manage it and recognize it's going to be an ongoing challenge to do it. But you have a way, all of a sudden, they know now you're managing it too, right? They know that it makes sense. We have to be concerned about, as I said, opening the floodgates, but it makes sense that you're following these 4 management pillars and you're making progress on these things. So
yeah, and Tom, I think I've said this before. One of the things that brought me to the collaborative was the cybersecurity data addendum, right? The one that sort of holds the third-party vendors that we use here accountable from a cyber hygiene standpoint. And you mentioned this, I think, just a couple slides ago, was, hey, what are those vendors now that we have partnerships with? What are they doing with their data, and how are they utilizing
Right.
from an AI perspective? That's another rabbit hole we could go down to for, our conversation between 3 and 4 o'clock today, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation we will continue to have. I mean, we did talk about it. We said these are the questions we need to ask, but how do you actually put them into your TPRM, your program? And we're going to have to get to that point. And thank you for mentioning the addendum as an example of a key law firm that it was provided by a law firm and is available to all members. And it's a good place to to start or have something as well. So thanks. So let me talk about the last piece of this, and this is use. The CISO must support IT in creating environments for the safe use and secure use of environment with the enterprise. So the strategies around this are on architecture, architectural considerations for all use cases, and we'll go over that, tactically next. Use case environments. Which environments are we going to put in, like ChatGPT, internal use AI assistants? The other thing here that often gets overlooked is the need for staff competencies in these areas. And we'll talk about different staff and competencies. Data analytics now. Remember, this is about data, data in and data out versus the writing of programs. It's a different paradigm. We used to log access. Now we have to really log data lineage and other things. All this is going to be opening up and coming to the fore in these new technologies, but you're going to need staff that are competent to be able to deal with these things and think about training them. From an architectural standpoint, members are developing point POCs, sandbox environments, developing user interfaces, limiting access on the need to know. You have to be very careful to make sure you're not opening up like a ChatGPT to all your data in the environment for all users who don't have a need to know. Leveraging guidance from Google and Microsoft on secure AI frameworks. They do have some good guidance. And obviously, if you're using their models, guidance is very apropos. Support from commercial tools that give visibility into data sets that used in AI models, as I mentioned. So we'll just lay out for now here, and again, it's in the presentation for those who want it, how this architectural process works, from acquisition to isolation, isolated environments, isolated data, the security controls that we still need to put in place here, the testing that still needs to be done, not only vulnerability and penetration, but integrity and bias testing, maybe developing a baseline model to work. The operation, logging, correlation of inputs and outputs. The logging is not great in any of these use cases that now exist. It's getting better, and there'll be more of that, and it will be also logging the data sets. And then independent examination of inputs and outputs from use cases for bias and output validity. So whenever there's an output here, depending on ChatGPT, it will have to be looked at in terms of what question was asked. And again, from the risk standpoint, are we relying fully on this, or is it just, providing some information? But these are big architectural points. All I'm going to list here is we are now continuing to have discussion as members are moving in, bringing in enterprise ChatGPT, Azure OpenAI, and some of the concerns that they have and information. We're still sorting out this information because it changes over time. But when you're in a group like this, you're going to hear from other people who are putting these in, and they're going to tell you their experiences and watch out for this setting and that kind of thing. It gives you the opportunity as opposed to just talking to Microsoft. And then there's a lot with Copilot that people are talking about. It's nice because you can use your own content, but you have to control this. You can turn some things on and off for different users. Works on Windows 11, not 10, as a member said. Difficulty using some parts of the Microsoft suite, like SharePoint. You can't inspect SSL traffic that easily. It's difficult. User prompts are only stored in memory, so maybe you might have to control those. And Microsoft is continually add granular controls. We are going to talk about these technologies in our sessions and gain more member advice and experience on this on an ongoing basis. These are now brought in on a beta approach, but it's happening in our members, and I'm sure it's happening to folks who are also on this team. With staff competencies, security staff, users, and auditors will need to be trained on this. There'll need to be analysts that need to be hired or existing staff trained on evaluating use cases. And here's kind of the list of functions that need to be looked at in terms of staff competency. Analysts, specialists, you may need data scientists who can train models. Maybe Cheryl, at the university, you'll be training those data scientists that will help others in industries and in your organization. Security staff training AI and architecture, security controls, what types of vulnerability scans have we done on these things, pen tests. Users have to be trained on using them, interpreting and presenting output, the correct prompts. And then auditors that need to come in and say, you know, examine the outputs and inputs for reliability and so forth. There may be organizations, you know, that are out there that ultimately will provide some information, actually do some testing, and then provide information on tests for particular public tools and things like that will be very useful. More and more of that is likely to happen, but you will need to have staff and train staff into competencies. So this is a lot to take in. I'm going to summarize landscape, AI working group, inventory, development trends, strategic plan, communication to management, boardroom, and to users, staff competencies, use case environments that you're implementing, and architecture. There's a poll question. Please do answer this for us. We appreciate your time here and your input. And then I think governance. Okay, AI governance committee, use request process, AI risk management, and AI policies and procedures. What we are going to do, as I mentioned here, the collaborative AI task forces continue to meet monthly to share issues and developments in AI technologies use. We believe this will occur for the rest of the year. An AI accepted use policy is available to members. A guidance document will be available in November. In the AI workbook, which was reflected with information in here, an actual workbook will be put together, including a risk assessment, an input form, and an audit form in January. And so I know we are at 2:48. So let me just go around here. Start with Greg. We've discussed a lot today. There's a lot of information here. What parting guidance would you offer the CISO based on your experience? What one thing would you want to leave the CISO with here today from your experience?
I would say study the slide deck. This is a great framework. Just really, it's just very high level. It's a great place to start. And you can be as granular with this, but it's an excellent starting point to utilize.
Thanks. Cheryl, anything?
I think I would tell people to, so I think many of us feel like we're playing catch up, like it's here and it's already at our doorstep, and we're, and I'd say start where you are, look at where you're at, and figure out the landscape and have those conversations with leadership and start looking at what are people doing? How do we start getting around data protection? How do we start protecting it? How do we get that education out to users? Because it isn't just about, that people are using it, but the skills. I mean, look at the skills that you need. What kind of training do we need to start training, especially in higher ed? Because you've got different audience types. You've got students, you have faculty, you have staff. So what kind of training do we need to provide them in order to use AI appropriately as well? So we want to be looking at not just data protection, but how to also use it wisely.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. And Kevin?
Yeah, it's, I take it from a little bit of a different approach. One of the things that I had asked my team to do a couple months ago, perhaps, was to run me just a brief report to say, who do we have that's currently already using these type of platforms, so that I can then reach out to them, poll them on what are you using it for, and not to slap their hand and not to say stop doing it. It's to really understand the business. What is the use cases for it? and how do we support them in a secure way and kind of have that be the driver for understanding what the value is behind these type of platforms for the business. And some of the responses I got back was like, wow, I never even really thought about using ChatGPT for something like this. So they come up with some pretty innovative and creative approaches to their particular area of the business.
And you reaching out to them helps do that, but they also understand your role as the CISO and how that's important too. You've established a great relationship. So I think that's really, really great advice. Thanks. Just one last thing here. I'm going to move on. Just so people know, we have a number of task forces that are continuing our security metrics one, or AI, as I mentioned. We're going to be talking about SEC regulations and CISO liability in November. Identity and access management is just kicked off. OT security in early January. I will also be providing an ISO 2701-2002 webinar to members on how to prepare for that based upon my experience in doing that with other companies and being in front of auditors who actually approve these things. And we're looking at other task forces this year and next year as well. So, and again, we have a tremendous amount of content. You can see it in the presentation that's available to members on all the different cybersecurity domains. So we have 13 questions, probably not enough time to do that. So let me just take them one at a time. Doesn't lowering costs typically involve labor savings? So the answer here is, yeah, are we going to reduce staff on this? And that's a tough one. I mean, there are people who are afraid of losing their jobs in this stuff. And yeah, go ahead, Cheryl.
I was going to say, I don't think it's really, we should dispel that fear of losing a job. We should talk about retraining the workforce, because when you add AI into the picture, the human has new skills, right? Because you still have to have humans to make sense of that data. I mean, just like what we said, AI isn't, it's not omniscient. It does require humans, and we do want to make sure that that data output from the AI isn't biased, that it is accurate, that it has integrity. So I think instead of thinking about it from a cost savings perspective, we look at how do you retrain the workforce, right?
Okay, very good. I'm going to move on. Thank you very much. But the next one is, what is the importance on training and upskilling employees to use AI, and how does it differ from intuitive learning, e.g. upgrading to a new version of Windows operating system? So it sounds to me more of a defined training and upskilling to do that. Are we considering that now? I know we brought it up as something that needs to be done. Maybe that's further down the line, but anyone have any thoughts on how they're going to do this? Are you going to, again, hire someone like a data scientist, or maybe we're too far down the line? Cheryl? Yeah.
We aren't that far down the road, if I'm being honest,
Yeah.
but it's been brought up. How are we going to train all of our people? And so we're going to be having to look into that, but we're not that far down the road yet.
Yep. Okay. Another question: how are APIs leveraged in adopting AI, and what is the importance of having an API risk management framework? That's a good one, because they are leveraging this stuff. That's something we're going to add. Thank you, Charles. Join us. It's a great question, and that's something that we'll be talking about because that's coming up. Thank you. Our board decided that all new software tools should have responsible AI integrated as a prerequisite. That's been talked about. Good for the board. I think that's good. What is the data addenda template mentioned? Apologies. Oh, okay. That's a data addendum. And if I'm correct in saying that, Greg, that you would attach to a contract to a third party that defines their security requirements. Am I right in saying that?
It does. In essence, it holds them accountable to prove that they're being compliant to whatever stringent needs you have or requirements you have from your perspective.
They may be asking where it is. It's offered within our document library, correct? Within the collaborative.
Right.
It is. And I was surprised to see how many companies turned around and they didn't realize what they needed to be doing. So that kind of held their feet to the fire, so to speak. We need to do this. We should be doing that. Basic stuff that we've been talking about ad nauseum for the past 10, 12 years.
Yeah, exactly. So let me just continue on. Like existing database tools, do the AI providers offer field level access security? That's an interesting user level access, but field level access security. Have you heard anything from Microsoft or anything on that? Or that's a good question. More and more, it's not answering your question, Charles, and it's a very good one, and it's something that we will bring up to the team. More and more of these are, I think, like Microsoft is adding more features and security on it, but it's sort of an evolving thing. That's what I get from the team, but I don't know, specifically with that one. But thank you. We will bring that up at the team. Worth a strong reminder here to everyone that AI is not just LLM, which we've talked about. There are 6 pillars to AI. Is the committee working on all 6 pillars? We've primarily focused on LLM right now, but we do have members that are looking at the other, types and pillars of AI, and those conversations will continue as we continue on our thing. But that's a good reminder there. Advice on how to leverage AI tools in a regulatory environment. Unstructured data would seem more difficult to leverage AI concepts. Any thoughts on that one? Although we said that Microsoft is pulling some of those from reports and stuff like that.
I don't know if I can answer Charles's question on that, but I think it's something that the CISO does think about. Like, when we're talking about different users using AI models, especially in we have a nursing college, we have engineering, and there's obviously regulatory environments.
Yeah.
And so I do think that is a difficult thing that we're going to have to be working through. And how do we get our heads wrapped around what are, those regulations and that data protection? And then how do we put that into place in those regulatory environments? I think that's a good topic for us to talk about in the work group, but I don't have an answer for him yet, but I think that's going to be a difficult thing.
Yeah, I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is tying it back to a governance framework.
Yeah.
Right.
Understanding what your regulations are that affect your particular line of business. And
I think that Charles Jones has some really good questions here that we need to incorporate.
I think he needs to be on the
He needs to come in, Charles.
That's right.
He needs to come
Come
in.
on down. The price is right.
Yeah, I think you would offer some good advice, and we would like to kind of return that. Maybe if you're a member, then join. If you're not, please let's talk about it. I really appreciate your questions. They're really, really poignant questions. So please share the slides. Email cannot be copied. Oops, did I mess up the email? There's something in the chat box, right, folks? Should be in the chat box for how to get these things.
It is, but you
Okay.
can't copy it, he's saying, or they're saying.
Yeah. Oh, you can't copy the email, right? Because it's displayed. Okay. But it's in the chat box. Thank you for that. And we want everyone to take these slides back with them. Here we go from Brian. VS Code's Copilot does a ton of speed up development work, and MSFT has said it is safe. Do you guys have a suggestion as to its safe use? I'd have to ask if a member is using that. I don't. That's a good question, but very specific to this model. Kinsey report was focused on the C-suite while neglecting the cost of metrics of software development. Any thoughts on software development impact of AI, using AI in that? Any thoughts from anyone?
I don't know if it's a thought so much as a hope, which is hopefully it will reduce the likelihood of code defects in the future with very quickly pointing out as organizations try to shift left in their DevSecOps program.
Right.
Well, you got models like this that can very quickly pinpoint exactly, hey, yeah, you got cross-site scripting or improper input validation that's going to affect how this application functions from a risk perspective. I'm hopeful that we can leverage AI for that and drastically reduce what comes out of poor code.
Yeah, I think I remember at the ISW conference, someone was talking about doing that, and it was very successful a lot of the time, and then at other points it wasn't. Okay, so it's like, and then we had someone wanting to use I forget, AI in one application that they were using, and they got shut down, and they were saying, well, when humans make mistake, it's okay, but when AI does, it's not. But anyway, yeah, there is, I think that's something, again, I think as Charles said, we could do a subgroup or continue our discussion in the work group. Will there be a CPE given for this webinar? Yes, absolutely. Does the cloud get to demo use cases and implementations? Yes, we open that up to members to do that. Sign me up, Charles. Thank you for you got us thinking. I probably need a weekly work group on this. Anyway, for everyone who attended today, thank you. I know it's dense material, but my panelists really brought this to the fore. Make sure you get a copy of the slides. And yeah, actually, while you're here, I'm gonna leave this up there. There we go. You can copy Tom Ward's name down if you didn't see it in the chat. Copy it from the chat, but there it is. 1 CPE credit. Use the presentation for that, and then when Tom sends it to you, we can confirm you attended here today. Thank you, everyone. My panelists, excellent job again. Go back to your real jobs, and you know.
Thanks, Tom.
I thank you again for everything. All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Take care.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah.